Dan Bublitz Comedy Productions.
My friend Dan, he's got a podcast, 'cause all comics need a podcast, and nobody had a podcast called The Art of Bombing. So Dan went out and bought a tape deck. Who knows why he bought a tape deck? Podcasts don't get played on tape decks, but Dan is from the 80s. So hey there, all you funny jerks, come talk to Dan about your work. Tell him all about your worst times. It's The Art of Bombing. Yay! Welcome to a brand new episode of the Art of Bombing podcast. I am your host, Dan Bublitz Jr., and with me as always is my co-host, co-producer, and cohort, Josh Shirley. How are you doing, Josh?
Good.
That's good.
Am good. So when we're recording this right now, it is.
There's a little guy walking past you. Just walked past your window. That was so funny.
Yeah. And it's kind of like ends up in a cul-de-sac behind me for listeners who can't see me. There's like a little tiny street out of a window behind me, and it doesn't get much action. But when it does, it's like weird stuff because people don't know that anyone else is around. So I don't know, a man singing, or like a dog just by itself, or like an extinct animal runs by. You're like, wait a second. That's
hilarious.
Yeah, red-tailed bobcat went extinct 100 years ago, and then I'm like, I guess not. And so there's lots of weird.
It's just a random dude.
Yeah, do looking out my back door. That you'll see all kinds of stuff out there. I'm good. As we record this, tomorrow is Halloween, and
as we record, tomorrow is Halloween. That is a good point,
right? And this is the first year I am not needed to walk my son around the neighborhood. So
is he going with friends?
He's going with friends. And here's their scam. You remember doing this as a kid? Like, they're like, we're going to have one costume and go around the neighborhood, but we could double up on the candy if we change costumes and go back around to the same houses. Like, that's their move.
Oh man, that's pretty smart. Oh, you're gonna have to on next time let us know how that worked out for him. Let us know.
Yeah, I will.
Let us know what the score was. How much candy did they get? It's funny. You're right. I didn't do anything this year for Halloween. I like Halloween as a holiday. One of the reasons is because I can wear a wig and nobody will ask any questions when I show up with hair. There's that, but no, I didn't do anything cool.
Do you guys turn your porch light on and have like kids coming around and stuff in your neighborhood?
So this is only our second Halloween at this house, and we had a few last year. Not a lot. We did get candy, but I don't know. We're at the end of a cul-de-sac, and I don't know. It was weird. And it also, I think, depends on weather. Like, we got like 6 inches of snow over the weekend. So,
right.
So I think that'll determine, how cold it is and stuff like that. But we'll definitely put we'll definitely have candy and for the trick-or-treaters. And then we'll end up with a ton of candy for me. And then I can go into a diabetic coma.
All right. So it'll be the Josh go next time, guys.
Yeah, right.
That'll be the little check-in that we do next time, whether you survived and whether my son got 2 rounds of candy.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, though. I did have a good weekend. I got a massage. I got a 90-minute massage, which is really good. I got my beard trimmed. And then I learned I have a problem with my beard that it likes to curl really bad, and it's hard to trim and hard to do anything with. And I learned, and now I'm totally going to sound like a hipster here, and I apologize, but I take better care of my beard than my hair, probably because I don't have hair. But my barber was like, if you just blow dry your beard, that'll help straighten it. And so I've been doing that. And look at how straight this is. It is
straight.
I got
I couldn't figure out
forming.
What was different.
Yeah. The hair drying and a little bit of oil works.
Dan's rocking a straight beard, man.
I am straight.
Look
at that.
Yeah.
Yep. Getting that
Well
style
played,
in.
everybody.
I'm working on it. I'm over here being a Mr. Fancy Pants, taking good care of my beard.
Yeah, he's
But
got
that's not why
certain
we're here.
top.
We're here to talk
That is not why
comedy.
we're here.
Yeah, we're here
We are
because
here
we
to talk
have a
comedy.
new episode of The Art of Bombing with a fantastic guest, Jennifer Sutherland. So funny. Such a great interview.
Yeah. Great stuff. There's some good what I don't know what's happening, folks.
I'm laughing
I don't
because
know.
I like paused for you to react and you're just like, oh, maybe I should say something. The delay was hilarious.
Yeah, I see. We got a good vibe on this podcast, folks. But every now and then, like Dan will start going, and you don't know if his monologue is going to be 5 minutes or 5 seconds. You just got to be ready at any time with your thoughts. And I was not.
That's fair.
Not to say that I don't have thoughts about this. I thought Jennifer was a great guest as well. I thought she has some great topics that we're going to cover next time in the callback. So I got those written down, ready to talk about them soon.
Yeah, and we're going into some great stuff on that. So make sure you tune in next week for that. And I think we've done enough of this BSing. I think we should just get to this conversation with our guest this week, Jennifer Sutherland. Enjoy.
It's the art of bombing.
I know
With the
it looks
slate.
ridiculous. Yeah, my slate, just my little clap.
I've seen worse. Don't worry.
Hey, I'm trying to run a pretty professional. I probably, if I want to step up my game, I probably do need the slate.
I mean, is people going to be like scrutinizing the video? Like, he didn't use a slate, you guys.
Well,
What
I
an
would hope
amateur.
not, because it's not going to be in the video. I'm cutting that out.
Yeah, no one knows.
Exactly. Nobody
I'm the
knows.
asshole for saying something, actually.
It's all
That's
good.
what's up.
It's all good. It's all good. They know. The audience knows that I have behind the scenes tricks. They've been listening to this podcast long enough to know all that jazz. So did you have any shows this last weekend? Did you perform anywhere?
Not over the weekend. I'm on call for work right now, so
okay.
didn't get to go out and play. My last show was my show at Brewability on
nice.
Wednesday, so
Yeah, and that's a fun show.
I have a good time. Sometimes I'm nervous about it, but even if we have like a tiny crowd, like that's the biggest concern. Like we still have a good time because the people that come are like really there for it.
Yeah, they're there to support it. Yeah. I had fun. I did it a few months ago. Well, actually, more than a few months ago. Geez, time goes too fast.
Yeah, it can be dead before we know it, right?
I was like, geez, it feels like it was only a few months ago. And then I'm like, wait, no, that was April. It's almost November.
Yeah, time. I'm really experiencing time telescoping as like I get older, I feel like. So yeah,
Same.
I feel it.
I'm like, oh man. Everything, I'm just like, oh, that was a couple years ago. And then I really think about it and I'm like, no, that was a decade ago.
Big same. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. But no, like I said, I had fun at that show because you're doing something a little bit different too, where a lot of shows and open mics are just that. But you're focusing more on clean material with yours because it's the cleanest show.
Yeah. It's fun. Sometimes people think they're ready for it, and then like I can kind of see them start to be like, oh, how many more minutes do I have? If they're not like, I don't have as much clean material as I thought I did. I'm like, that'll happen.
Oh yeah. That I feel like that happens a lot just in comedy in general, not just like what kind of material you can do, but you see it where a comic will say they have X amount of time, but really they only have less than that.
Yeah, I've started telling people like, hey, how about like everybody does 10, and if somebody goes short or somebody goes long, then it's okay. But there's like a few people that they're like, I really want to do a headlining set, and it's like, all right, I trust you to do that, so we'll book you to do that.
Yeah, and then you're like, you better do that if you've been booked for it.
Yeah, and so far, you know what? Like, I won't knock on wood loud, but we've been doing really well.
What inspired you to want to do the clean show?
Anyone who knows me knows I have a filthy mouth, and it would never be my idea. Peter Goebel actually recently did it, and then we did a garage show together. And after I got off at the garage show, he's like, "It's crazy you run a clean show. You have the best dick jokes." And I'm like, "Thank you. That like warms my little black heart." I just wanted to do a show at that bar because I'm friends with Tiffany, the owner at Brewability, and one of the things that we were trying to think of to, like keep it where nobody would be punching down, first of all, because of the nature of the venue.
Which that's another thing that's really interesting and really cool about that venue is that they are how do you say it?
They said they employ people of all abilities.
Okay,
yeah.
that's okay, perfect.
Yeah, so like any given night of the week there's people working, that like might be blind, deaf, have Down syndrome, autism, like just all kinds of people. And so it's like super inclusive. So we wanted it to be an environment where people are telling jokes that like don't make anybody feel bad. And also there's lots of kids there like a lot of the time. So I was like, all right, well, what if we do like a clean show where I can book people that like I know and I can trust to do a set that is going to be, just fun and joyful for everybody.
Yep.
And because people don't sit in the front rows at comedy shows until like they have to, and like this was
especially
the kind of place,
now with all the crowd work clips that are out.
Yeah, and so like this is the kind of place where I'm like, I want everybody to know it's going to be a good time for them.
Yeah, and no, that's great. And I think too with that, like more shows would and you got to be careful, especially if it's a venue where they're trying to build inclusive and family friendly environment where, like you said, there could be kids there. You have to be conscious of that. I see so many people who make that, it's kind of a rookie mistake where they'll book a show at a place that essentially is family friendly, and they'll be like, well, this is comedy, you should have knew. It's like, well, you should have talked to your venue a little bit better. You should have knew what you were getting into. You can't get mad if they're doing a showcase or an open mic or any of that during their regular business hours and a family comes in there. You can't be mad at them.
100%.
Like that's
Like when I first started getting booked at breweries and stuff, I was like, I didn't know any better. I started seeing like children, like elementary age school children, like in the front row, and I was like, I don't know, having alcoholic parents looks way more fun now than it was when I was a kid, but like I didn't realize there were gonna be kids in the front row. And so like knowing that as a comedian, I feel like is helpful too, because I was just like, oh, I gotta figure out what punches to pull. And I would have moms tell me they've heard it before, and I was like, you don't know what I'm gonna say, lady.
Yeah, exactly. That's so funny. That happened at one of our shows here in Loveland. Somebody came in with their kid, and we warned them. We're like, hey, this in our show, to be fair, is in a separate room than the brewery, so it's not like it's just open to anybody.
So they kind of have to be there on purpose.
Exactly. They have to be there on purpose. And we warn them. We're like, hey, this is an adult show. And they're like, our kid has heard anything. And one of the comics, and I'm not going to say their name, they're a great comic. I love them. And they were even, we warned them, especially when we were about to bring them up, because they lean more on the dirty side. And we're like, this is an adult show.
Yeah.
And they're like, our kid has heard it. And then when that comic got up, they eventually left.
I'm telling you.
And we didn't feel bad about it because we warned them. We're like, hey, this is an adult show. We're in a different room of the brewery. If you're purposely bringing your kids here, be ready. It's not billed as a family-friendly show.
There's a piece of that where I'm just like, this is one of the things why I don't have kids, because it feels like it would be such a pain in the ass to be like, no, I know maybe they shouldn't be hearing that. I got to pack them up and leave. Like, I'm not going to be the parent who's like, oh, we're trash. They've heard everything. Like, I don't want to do that.
You don't want to be that person that is just like, I'm a terrible parent. They've heard everything.
Yeah, I'm going to lean into it. Who cares? Go for it.
Do whatever. They've heard it all.
Yeah.
That's just a regular Saturday night in the
We talk about
trailer.
dead whores all the time in our house.
Just a Saturday conversation in the trailer park, all right? Gosh.
Yeah, our Mad Libs are bonkers. Don't worry.
Oh, that's funny. But I do think there is like an audience of children, or not, or teenagers, where they do like going and comedy can be enjoyed by all ages. And that's where having family friendly shows comes in handy, because, when I was coming up in San Diego,
I did a lot of shows with a company who that was their focus because a lot of their shows were in coffee shops and things like that. So
cool.
they had to be, family friendly, and their thing was, be clean and clever, that kind of thing. And so it really helped shape me so that, you can perform in all the, in front of different audiences or whatever. But it was cool to see, like, there was one of their shows where every Saturday, this mom and her daughter would come in. Her daughter was a huge fan of comedy. And it was just amazing to see. Just like a teenager, and just loved coming to stand up.
I love that. Like, my parents would have no part of that, but like, there's a piece of me that's like, oh, in a world.
Right? I was like,
great.
I wish that was my parents bringing me to these to comedy shows when I was a kid.
100%. Yeah.
Although, to be fair, my parents were letting me watch, Cheech and Chong and Benny Hill and things I probably shouldn't have anyway, but
Yeah.
they're the parents that would have brought me to a comedy show and bragged about how I seen everything.
Yeah, that would have been my dad, because he let us watch like horror films at like wildly inappropriate ages.
Oh, I believe that. Same. It was funny. My dad was a big comedy person. My mom was a big horror person. So like I saw Cheech and Chong when I was like 8 or 9 years old. And same with Child's Play and like Friday the 13th. I'm like, what? Like both sides of the spectrum when I'm like 8 or 9.
Yeah. I love it all now, but I'm definitely still afraid of the dark. And that's like 100% childhood trauma. I know.
Oh, I'm afraid of dolls. And that's 100% Child's Play.
Yep. I get it.
It's like, I like my toys. I like my action figures. But you get anything that's, over a foot tall, I'm not having anything to do with it.
Or with like yarn hair.
Yeah.
Absolutely not in my house.
And then Puppet Master, that did not help either. That really sold me on the doll. Like
I don't know why. Like that one really stuck. I'm not a person who's afraid of clowns, but it was one of the things I saw way too young, and like I don't know. Like
I'm not a big fan of clowns.
I mean, if I ran into one in a dark alley, I would not be happy. But just in general, if I see one, I'm not gonna like clam up. But
that's funny.
Yeah.
I tell you what, though, as much as I don't like clowns, dolls is what I hate the most. Like I used to work for an estate liquidation company when I lived in San Diego, and we would just get these estates, right? And so what we did is we buy estates, and then we'd sell the stuff like on eBay or Amazon or whatever, or in our warehouse. And so my job was I was an eBay lister, so I would go through the stuff that we had that we were going to put on eBay, do research, and then put it on, do all the stuff. And I remember one time I opened a box and there was a doll, and it was so creepy. It scared the shit out of me. And I was like,
We're just like, nope.
That's exactly, I told my supervisor, I'm like, I'm not listing that. You guys can list it, but I'm not having anything to do with that doll. It was very creepy, and I refused to list dolls. I mean, I would list women's clothing, and I knew more about women's clothing than a man my age should have, but I would not list a doll.
And that's how Dan avoided getting involved with Annabelle, you guys.
Exactly.
Perfect.
This stuff creeped me out.
Rightly so.
Oh, well, we could sit here and talk about horror because it is October, which, I mean, it is fitting in that sense, but this isn't a horror podcast.
Right,
I mean, it kind of is because we're talking about the horrors of
stories.
comedy. Yeah, the horror story. Mm-hmm. So I would love to hear your horror story of comedy.
It's like, okay, so I did think about this before I came down. I asked my boyfriend, like, when have you seen me bomb and when have you seen me do good? I have to like come up with something to talk about. He's like, I've never seen you like bomb, but I've seen you play to an empty audience. I'm like, that's not the same. So then I was like, all right, he wasn't there. That's why.
He didn't see the one time.
Yeah. And like, to be fair, I do think like bombing is kind of a spectrum because there's like on the one side, like people are like kind of accepting you, but they don't love it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes all the way from like that to like they tolerate you to like they actively don't like you.
Yep. I mean, there's definitely a spectrum.
Yeah, and I feel like the worst show I've ever had was definitely in that area of like I'm being tolerated and I'm not being liked, and it was a show at Wide Right that I like pretty much coerced my best friend into coming to because I was like, I don't think tickets are selling for this. Like, would you just please come and we'll get wasted afterward? And it's like a late show. It's like 10 o'clock, which for like us old people are like, bitch, it's a school night. So
it's funny. Anytime if there's a show before 7, I'm like, hell yeah. Sign
Literally
me up.
anything that starts before 9, I'm like, Gucci, I love it. Yay. And then like it starts getting later than that, and I'm like, I'm gonna kill myself.
Why did I say yes to this?
Yeah. Anyway, so it's a 10 o'clock show. I'm like third in the lineup, and there's like not very many people there. I don't know what was going on that night. Maybe there's a game, but I think maybe it was my mistake to think that like the time I was given, because I was like, it's like the talk show thing that they do, and I think the amount of time I had was also the amount of interview time as well as like my set.
Oh, so it was like a combination of both.
Mm-hmm.
You do your set, do the interview stuff.
Exactly. And so
Okay.
like I get like halfway through my material and I get a light. To this day, I don't know if it was because I was doing so shit or if like that was just the amount of time I had. But yeah, like my stuff sometimes can sound sad, I guess, if like you're like listening with the lens of like, oh, poor thing. But like I try to say everything like bubbly, so it's, you know, it's
Yeah,
it's
try to
sad but
make it
funny,
fun.
you know? There's been enough time and the tragedy. It's comedy now.
Yeah.
But like
You know, it's funny that you say that, because I've dealt with that here as of late, because I've been trying to do more stuff about my mom, who passed away years ago.
mhm.
And to me, it's not like fresh anymore. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I'm at that point where I can talk about it, I can laugh about it, but audiences don't always receive it in the way that I would like them to.
No, yeah. So at Wide Right, like it's a younger crowd, right? And I was doing some stuff about my dad who had passed and like growing up poor. And these like 20-year-old kids are just looking at me like, parents die. And I'm like, I have terrible news, you guys. So it didn't go great.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. So like my best friend, like she was not having a good time because like the crowd that was there, she's like so suburban and adorable. But like a week later, we went out to another show. She's like, I was uncomfortable. And I was like, go home and think about your trust fund. You're going to be fine, you know?
It's funny. It's like, were you uncomfortable because of how bad I was doing? Or...
I think it was a 60-40 split, if I'm going to be honest. Like, she was made to feel unsafe and she had to listen to that shit. Like,
it was a combination.
Yeah. Yeah.
1-2 punch.
So, yeah, that was definitely the worst I did. And like I said, I just think the crowd was kind of tolerating it. They were not there for it. Like, in front of people like closer to my own age, like middle age, like 35, 45.
Yep.
Those people, like, they're there for it. Like,
Yeah.
they come up after shows and they're like, that's so great. But yeah, these kids are like, fuck that. Talk about cocaine.
It's funny because I find that too, like at least for my audience, I've been finding where it's like my age plus or minus 10 years, I can do really good. You get past that either direction and I'm like, ooh, this is going to be tough.
I don't know, man. I
I'm
slayed
not
at the old
relatable.
folks' home.
Oh, hey, good for you. Good for you. I don't always slay with the older folks. Not because I don't think, for me, I think it's just because my references don't always make sense. Because I am a nerdy comic.
I could
do,
see that.
and I do talk about nerdy things sometimes. Like I will make references to like Nintendo and like things from the 80s, and it's not, you know, they probably just don't get the references, and that's where that comes in. Like I'm aware of why it's happening. Could I correct it? Probably. Am I going to? Probably not.
I mean, how many like gigs at the retirement home are you trying to get, you know?
Exactly. I'm trying to get gigs at the nerd conventions. That's what I want. Not
Dude, that would be so litty. Oh, yeah.
Oh, they're so fun. I've done a few like comic book nerdy conventions, and they're so much fun. That's like right.
amazing.
If I could perform if that's all I had to do is like go to conventions and perform at them, and that's how I made my living, I would be the happiest. I wouldn't need to be on TV or, you know, Netflix, any of that shit. Just let me go to cons and get paid for it.
Yeah, that's like a super cool niche, like the cruise ship comics.
Yep.
Like if
Yep.
you just like, that's what I do all year.
Yeah, I just go to comic book conventions.
Yeah, I know what dates and where. It's gonna be great.
It's amazing. Yeah, that would actually be amazing. I sound like I'm being condescending towards it, but that
this
is ultimately
100% earnest, everyone.
It is, yes. 100%. That is what I would love to do.
Dude, you heard it here first.
Yeah, so if you book a comic book convention, I would love to come perform at it.
Yeah, anybody listening, let's go.
Yeah, let's do it.
This room vouches for the material, by the way.
As she's looking around, she's like, yeah, definitely, it checks out. He could definitely probably talk about nerdy things.
For at least 3 days.
It's true. I could definitely pull that off. It's funny, like, well, before we were recording, I said that too. You were like, you were looking at some of the toys and stuff, and I said that, and I couldn't remember who it was, but somebody was in here, and they were like, oh, so it's not an act. That was like the reaction, like, oh, you really are nerdy.
I like that somebody thought that was like your made up persona that you worked so hard on. It's like, I have to convince them I'm a nerd.
Right? Like, that's what I'm trying to do. Like, yeah, I'm trying to pretend to be a nerd because, you know, it's already hard enough in the world. Like, you know what? Why don't I pretend to be a nerd? And then I'll never have a chance with women.
Like, how did you stumble upon nerd? You were like, rednecks taken, puppets are done. Nerd. No one's ever heard a white dude be a nerd before. That's what I'm doing.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I was like, oh, redneck, that's my dad. Can't do that. I gotta be, what's the opposite of my dad? A nerd.
Also, I don't mean to sound like I'm like
defiance,
just
but no.
like talking mad shit to Dan. I was actually like commenting on how jealous I was of some of his Gambit action figures
Yeah,
because I have
exactly.
not as cool ones at my house.
And then proceeded to show me a picture where you were Gambit for Halloween. So.
Yeah, so like we're bonding. I'm not being an asshole.
Exactly. We just became BFFs.
Ta-da!
Oh, that's amazing. But going back, so like so I'm curious. So you said you weren't sure if you got lit because you were doing mad or if it was your time or whatever. So did you keep going when you were lit to finish what you thought was your time, or did you like, oh, I'm gonna wrap up
I
and then
wrapped
do the
up
interview?
because I was trying to be professional, and I was like, "That's a light. I'll finish on as big a laugh as I can get in about a minute, and then I'm gonna sit my ass down." So
Okay, because I was wondering if you were able to do the interview too, if like
Yeah.
you're like, I don't think it's my time for the light, and you keep going and then not get the interview, because that would have really
I
been
feel
weird.
like that. I don't live in a world where my brain would tell me to do that. Like,
Well,
I'm
that's
just
good.
gonna
No,
do
that's
as much
good.
time as I feel like I prepared.
They told me I'm doing 20 minutes. I'm doing 20 minutes.
In fact, I got a hot 30. Fuck it. No, I would never.
I'm filming a special. Don't you see my camera in the back?
In front of all 6 of you, motherfucker. No. So yeah,
That's funny. How did the interview part of it go then?
I mean, it was fun because so it's Jake Cameron's show. What is it called? Late Night at Wide Right, and like he's a doll. So like doing the show with him and answering questions and just like bullshitting was totally fun.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the set portion was not my finest.
I mean, it'll happen. I mean, sometimes it's hard too to like perform when, I mean, it's not just the material, but when you're performing for such a small audience too, like in small audience. And then if you're doing darker material, because at least like if it was like a full room, I'm sure there's going to be people that are going to like relate and be part, into it, which then you can focus on those people and ignore the people that aren't into it.
Yeah. Well, even on that like the spectrum of bombing we're talking about, like when you're being a little bit better than tolerated, I feel like that's when people do the thing where they'll smile and nod at you,
Yeah.
like, I get it, and you're like, that almost is worse than active booing, but like it does feel more supportive, and yeah, so
I feel that
depends on how many people, what people.
all the things. I see that happen a lot. Like I've seen that happen a lot in like the upper Midwest, where people aren't necessarily laugh out loud, but they'll smile and nod, and you're like, oh man, this is the worst. I feel like I'm bombing. And then after the show, they're like, that was the best show I've ever seen. And you're just like, why did you react that way?
Yeah, it's like there's in some kind of like speed situation where there's a bomb under their chair, and if they make a noise, they're gonna get exploded or something. Like, I don't understand why there's like,
Just
I
gonna sit here and-
approve.
pretend like I'm into it, but then they really are into it. That's what's funny about it.
Yeah.
I mean, and I guess that's kind of why it's important as comedians that we, no matter what the circumstances is, and it's easier said than done, but you perform the best that you possibly can.
Yes.
Despite how the crowd is reacting to you, because while it might seem like they're not into what you're doing, they could very well be very into it. And when you start, feeding off that energy of, oh, I'm not doing well, and then you start not doing well because you're like,
then you're in the vicious
frantic.
cycle.
Yeah, you're in that vicious cycle, but then you don't put on the best show that you could for these people. And then it becomes a bomb.
You never know what's going to happen. That's kind of part of why it's fun, but also part of why it's like a little bit, I got butterflies every time.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. I didn't, it's been a while since I've got nervous to go up. But I was at a festival a few weeks ago, and everybody was doing so good, and I was closing out the show, and oh my God, I was so nervous. I was like, oh no. What if I bomb? What if I'm the one that
Just absolutely in your head.
Yeah, I was in my head. I was like, what if I'm the one to ruin this show for everybody?
What if
I'm the
everyone
last
ran
one...
out of laughs, you guys?
I was so nervous. And then I was fine. But,
of course.
Still, I was so nervous. I was just like, oh, this is that time where I'm going to bomb. There's too many stakes. There's too many stakes, and I'm going to mess it up. But
stakes on something definitely makes it weird for some reason.
Oh yeah, because you put all that extra pressure on yourself too.
Yeah, and nobody else gives a shit.
No, exactly. Nobody's thinking that. They're just like, oh, this is a really good show. The next person's going to be really funny too. That's all they're thinking.
Yeah, they're sitting there with their beer like, make me laugh.
Yep. Just show me a good time. Keep this going. Yeah. It's easy to get inside our heads too, like as a comedian. I don't know how it is for you.
I live inside my head.
I'm just...
I wake up inside my head.
And I can't get out.
Straight up, dude.
Relatable. But yeah, it's like you get, especially when you're on stage, it's easy to get inside your head. If you tell a joke, doesn't land, or you start to feel like you're losing the audience, and you're just start thinking about, oh, well, how do I get out of this? And then the wheels start turning, and
or if there's just that one person making a weird face at you the whole time,
or not laughing. There's that one person that's doing the arm cross and giving you the stink eye. Yep. And then you can't focus.
Why is it? There could be 80 people in that room, and you're just like, what is that dick's problem?
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly it. And of the 80 people, 79 are laughing their asses off, and then you see that one person, and you're just like,
did I cut them off on the way here? What is happening?
That's funny. Did I cut them off in traffic? Did I?
They recognize me. They're like, that's the bitch in the Mazda.
I hate her so much.
She drives like a twat.
She didn't let me merge. That's funny.
I do have road
I wouldn't
rage.
be surprised if that happens. That would be funny if that was the
to.
reason somebody hated a comic. They're like, oh, I remember this person when they cut me off. Or even not even just in traffic, just in general, cut them off, budged in front of them at the coffee shop or something stupid, something that doesn't matter. They're just holding this grudge.
But I go through those possibilities, and that's what I'm saying. I live in my head. Anxiety is just ooh, what if this?
What if this is the reason they're not laughing?
Yeah, they're gonna be waiting outside because they know what you drive.
They're getting their revenge.
The car is keyed, the tire is flat. It's on.
I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna have 2 flat tires because they're mad that I cut them off today.
Yep. And they didn't like my set.
That was the icing on the cake.
They were like, my dad dead too, bitch.
I'm sad about it.
That's not something
Do you
find
find
about.
when you're doing darker material, and I say darker just because it's just the best way to describe it, but when you start talking about death and things like that, people react differently because it affects people differently, and sometimes hits close to home. Do you find there's a big variation in your audience, like you were talking about with the time that when you bombed, that it felt like because they were so young, it just they were not aware. They're like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to think about this.
Yeah.
Versus, people our age, you start living that life, and you realize that's part of life, that the life cycle. Do you find that that there's a lot of variation in that when you're doing that kind of material?
I I feel like it's more of a dichotomy. Like people
Mm-hmm.
like either like look at you like, oh, uncomfortable. I don't want to think about that happening ever. Or the people like they'll nod and be like, oh yeah, I remember that.
They're either into it or they're not. Kind of.
Yeah, nobody's ever like come up to me afterward and be like, how dare you talk about your dead parents like that? You know, so it's like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's gallows humor, right? Like you have to laugh so you don't cry, and I think people that have gone through it already, they get that.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Do you find like over time as you've been doing it, how have you like deviated or molded the material to try to be more appealing? I know you talked about earlier that you try to present it in a fun, bubbly way. Is that something that you learned right away, or how did you get to that point where you're like, oh, I realize I need to make this a little more presentable?
I think
Because of-
initially, like I thought, like if I was told, like if you say something with a smile on your face, it's easier to take, right? And so like presenting it just in that like I don't know, kind of like you said, bubbly fashion, like that's one part. But like I realized pretty quickly on at open mics when I was like developing like the bits, it had to be like make it okay as soon as possible. So like you introduce the topic and then like a little like quick tag to be like, it's okay. See, we're having a good time. And then I could go back to the story and then kind of like give it that kind of like staggered level where it's like, okay, they're dead, but it's kind of funny. And then it wasn't really funny before they died, but this part was funny. And then people will be like, oh, okay, like she's not going to go home and put a exhaust hose in the car. Like it's fine.
She's not really that sad about it.
Yeah, she's going to be okay.
Yeah, I always find that funny when that happens, when you tell a joke that might be considered sad because of the subject material, and that you, instead of getting a laugh, you get that.
Oh, yeah. That's like that's how you know you're doing it wrong. Almost it feels like because
absolutely.
you're like because yeah, that's what was happening, and I was like, all right, I gotta come up with something. So yeah, like
Yeah,
I
'cause you
started
don't want them to
doing-
feel bad for you.
No, and it's like also one of those things like I've had people say like, oh, that reminded me of like when I was taking care of my dad and whatever, because like I have a bit about like how I tried therapy during the pandemic, and part of that came out because like I was taking care of my dad, and that's what stressed me out during the pandemic, and like I was losing my hair, and my dad was the most vain person like I had ever known in my whole life, and so I was just like, this vain man who loved his hair more than anything is sending me to therapy because I am losing my hair. And so it's just like, there's like, that's fucking funny. So,
That is funny. That's a funny concept, that he's stressing you out so much that you're losing your hair, and that was like his like.
he
thing that
literally, until the day he died, was in the mirror like quaffing himself with his little greaser haircut.
That's funny. That reminds me of Rob Lowe's character in a TV show. He's in the show Austin Fire or whatever it is. It's whatever, but he's very, very adamant about his hair. It's just funny.
Some dudes, like, that's their whole thing. Like, okay.
Yeah. I've never been that guy, and thank God, because I would have been really sad about it.
Like, my whole identity.
It's gone. What did I do, universe?
I've been
What
smoked.
do you hate me, God?
Yeah. So I definitely talk about my dad more than my mom in comedy, just because like she died way before he did, and like it wasn't funny circumstances. So like I only have like a couple of jokes, and I've tried them a couple of times, and they fucking hate shit every time. So I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I'll go back to working on that at some point so they both get roasted. I don't want anyone to feel left out. But, like,
You're like, I want everybody to feel the pain. Get
yeah,
that
I want everyone to be roasted and everyone to identify with the roasting.
Yeah, I don't know. It is interesting because I find that, excuse me, like I said, I've been talking about my mom, who she passed away years ago. And so to me, I think it's hilarious. I think it's one of the best jokes I've ever written. And sometimes it hits well, sometimes it doesn't. because it is a little bit darker, because the bit basically I talk about how my mom wanted to be a grandma, and then she tried to guilt me into having kids, and she would say things like, oh, I'm probably going to die before I have grandkids. And in the joke, I say, and unfortunately, my mom did die, thus proving you should be careful what you wish for. Because she died and I still have my weekends free. It's a great dark joke.
Words have power.
Yeah.
I've been reading a lot about manifesting. I'm sorry. I can't help myself.
Oh my God, that's amazing. I might have to use that as a tag.
Go get it.
But that's so funny. But again, like with that joke, sometimes it does really well and people are like, oh, that's amazing. And then other times they're just like, ooh. Like I did it the other day at a show, and I'm trying to do more, like I'm working on newer stuff, and this is part of some of the stuff that I'm doing. And the crowd was not, they were not, I got silent. I didn't even get like, oh, I got like nothing. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm aware. I called it out. I was like, okay, you're not into dead mom jokes. All right. We'll do something else tonight.
Someone celebrating their mother's birthday tonight? Is that what's going on?
You're like, whose mom died? Because it wasn't mine, because that was 20 years ago.
Yeah, sometimes when it just goes over so badly, I'm like, I will buy whoever's but her a drink. Like, relax.
Just raise your hand. Who's so sad? I will have a drink with you after the show.
Oh, yeah.
And by have a drink, I will buy it, and then I'm leaving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know you like that.
I don't know. It is funny, like the whole thing with comedy and dark material, because it is really a fine line. Like I feel like some of the best jokes are super dark. They're
100%.
It's almost like that taboo, because you shouldn't laugh at it. You're like, oh, that is too dark. I shouldn't laugh at that. But at the same time, super funny.
I don't know where in society like people draw the line, like when you quit liking dark humor, because it feels like a choice to me, because like I don't know, maybe
I would agree with that.
Maybe your life is just so good you don't understand
you just
gallows
don't know how
humor.
To be sad.
Yeah, like I'm like,
you can't identify with sad.
like I don't get it, because you gotta laugh not to cry. Like there's such a like important part of life, and then some people are just like, no, I refuse, you're disrespectful. And like, oh man, your life must be so much fun if that's your approach.
Yeah, like how do I get that life? Where do I sign up for that?
Yeah, I assume that comes with a Lexus. Like what?
Where do I sign for the Lexus?
Yeah.
You're probably not wrong on that. I mean, if I had a Lexus, I'd be probably a lot happier. I'm lying. I would not.
I mean, I feel like I would be secure. That's the thing. Like, I want a car I can trust.
Be secure.
You know what I mean? I grew up poor. I didn't trust a car. All right.
I hear you.
I get halfway to your place to do this podcast, and I'm like, all right, bitch, we're halfway there.
We've only got halfway to go.
Don't you do me dirty.
That's definitely relatable in my. You can ask about anybody that knows me. They know what kind of luck I've had with cars.
Well, and it's like, it's not even luck, right? It's like, well, the car's as old as I am, if not more. So we all have bad days. I get it. It's tempting fate every time.
Yeah, that's for sure. Definitely been there. Now let's go back. So, we talked about, the bombing, and we've already talked a little bit about how you've tried to approach doing darker material and trying to present it in a different way. But like when you have a bad set, it doesn't have to be a total bomb, but when you have a bad set, what are you doing to analyze it, or like try to like go back, figure out what happened and prevent it from happening again?
I think I always have to start with telling myself like, it's not the crowd, because I feel like when people turn on the crowd, it's just like such a cop out, and like I don't like to see it. So like, I can't be like, they shouldn't do that, and then I go home and be like, well, that was just crap crowd. Like,
well, and it's one thing too to like complain about a crowd like after the show versus while the show's happening, because there's a lot of comics that'll get mad on stage.
That's what I'm talking about. Like I don't like to see that.
Talk about a quick way to lose an audience.
Yeah, it's like, well, you weren't maybe doing great before, but now they're like actively going to not like you. What are you doing? So yeah, I always try to think was it the crowd, like, if it was a crowd, like, if it's something like where, like I was saying, if it's a younger crowd and they're not liking the dead parent stuff because maybe it's not relatable or it's scary, like, what can I pepper in to, like, make them feel okay about it? Or, if it's a bigger crowd and it wasn't going, like, all right, what was wrong with me today? Because, like we were talking about, when you get in that vicious cycle, like, I've had a couple instances where, like, stuff just wasn't hitting, and it was more like, I think, my confidence or like my stage presence being affected by like other shit not even related to like being on stage right then and there. And so, like, trying to be in the moment more is something I've been working on a lot this year, and I think it's gone a long way, because I have, like, even like the really small crowds that I've had since that show, I found a way to like either pivot to make jokes work better for them if it felt like I was getting into that area where they were just like, I'm not sure about this. And, like, I think that's the only, like, you can only learn from it after the fact, but if you can, like, pivot in the moment, like, that feels a lot better.
Oh, absolutely. And you kind of led into the next thing that I was talking about, like, when you're in that moment where you feel like you tell a joke, doesn't land, or you feel like you're starting to lose the audience, how do you try to pivot or deviate from continuing down that road?
If it's like a person, like we were talking about, or like if I feel like I'm like I hit a nerve somewhere, like I try to like kind of address it almost and be like, oh, like, sorry if that was whatever, or like do a little like, you look like you're from the future or something fun with that person to like try to like get it back up and off the ground. And it's like, if the whole room isn't feeling something, then it's like, okay, I just need to like go into a different like couple minutes of material.
Let's do something different altogether.
Yeah, like, you don't like dead parents? What about online dating, you guys?
What a transition. You don't like dead parents? What about dating?
How about that? Everyone hates that.
That's something we can rally against, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, it's basketball. You got to pivot.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you find that, and because I know this is something that somebody else pointed out to me, is that if I was having like a bad day, or like I had a certain energy before a show, that sometimes my energy, for whatever reason, then I would bring the show down. Like, I wouldn't do very well. And it wasn't because of my comedy. It wasn't because of my writing. It wasn't because of performing. It was because I was just having a shitty day.
Yeah,
and that energy followed me to the stage.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely... Ugh.
Yeah, is right.
I've been there, and it sucks. Like, because...
Are there things you try to do, like if
feel
you're
it happening?
Yeah, but if you're having a bad day and you have a show, what do you try to do to put yourself into the mindset of, oh, I gotta I gotta shake this because I have to go perform, and try to do my best?
Like putting on a song or something and like just listening to it. Like, I quit like running my set in my head and be like, you know what you're gonna say, you don't. Like, you gotta go to like switch your brain into something else. And so, like, yeah, I'll go like listen to some loud Britney Spears or something.
Try to change your mood.
Or like at least shift my focus, because I feel like the intrusive thoughts and anxiety circle that are like going on in my head that are ruining my day, I just need something to like snap that cycle and be like, okay, how about not that today, right now, for just like 10 minutes. You only have to like not think about it for 10 minutes. And like, that seems more doable than just like change every fucking thing about yourself.
Right? Definitely a lot easier. Just hit that reset button.
Yeah, and then you only have
That's
to
why
like,
I'm a big advocate of
maintain.
Nintendo. Reset.
Yeah, you don't have to do it forever. Just like keep it together for the crowd, and then like go home and have a drink. It's fine.
Yeah. You can deal with this shit later. Get through the show, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And most of the time, I feel better. So like that's kind of like the cool part about it.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point too of how to like shake that. Is to try to reset and refocus, and just like not even think about the comedy. Just go take 5-10 minutes before you have to go up and just totally think about something else.
Yeah.
That whatever that is, whether like for you said it was music. If it's not music, if you're listening and this is something you deal with, if thinking about comic books or a podcast or something, whatever it is that gets you out of that bad day, focus on that.
Or even literally like video game or something like that.
Yeah,
you have
whatever
to
it
like
is. Yeah.
focus on.
Yeah, that's something to distract your mind essentially.
Like
Yep.
some kind of fidget spinner. I don't know, whatever the kids are using these days.
Is it I don't know. Are they using fidget spinners? Tell us. Leave it in the comments. I don't know. We're old.
What are the youth doing?
What are you youths doing these days?
I haven't seen my young friends for a while. I don't know what they're talking about.
I don't have young friends. They make me feel
I
old,
said
no.
plural like such a fucking liar. I have one young friend.
All the young people I know are other comedians. So
Yeah, like I know them, but like I have one friend. I'm not what you would say popular in the comedy scene.
the truth is coming out. You heard it here first.
Oh, they all know.
Oh, that's hilarious. I feel that though. I feel that. Like I feel your pain.
You know,
Are those-
I think it's just like all of us old people are like used to like it being very easy to like slip into like a crowd and be like, okay, people, what's up?
Yeah.
Comedy scene, I mean, I know we're all weird, but it just feels harder to do with younger people than like
I think
I'm gonna say like under 30.
Yeah, and I think with comedy especially, when you're older, you have more life obligations.
Oh,
And so you
100%.
can't like dedicate all your time to comedy.
Yeah, it's not your
And
whole social
It's
life.
not your whole, yeah, exactly. And so it's a little harder to weave in and out of because it's like, oh, these younger people are wanting to, they're just hitting every open mic. They're just going and hanging out with comic. They're doing all comedy 24/7, which is great. If that's what you're doing, good for you. But like, us older comics, like we have other things going on. Like I'm not going to go do comedy 24/7 because
I don't want to live in my car anymore, you know?
Exactly. I enjoy having a roof over my head.
Yeah, you know, it's
So
what it is.
So it ends up being a little harder to weave in and out of because if you're not like always in, just surrounded by it, I feel like, but I don't know. Maybe I'm full of shit and I don't know what I'm talking about. But
Honestly, if there was like somebody like my age, like 41, and they were always around and they were hanging out with 20-year-olds, I'd be like, the fuck is your deal?
right?
So I don't know.
I agree, and I also think it's weird. I think about that a lot when I'm hanging out because I do get along very well with younger people.
Sure.
I obviously you're in the studio, you look around, you're like that checks out.
No, I don't know.
But I think about that, I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely can't be hanging out with young people all the time. This is weird.
Yeah, well, like after I miss my bedtime by a certain amount, I'm like, oh, this is actually physically painful. So
Oh, that's too relatable. God damn. Thinking of that, I'm like, wow, we should probably wrap up. I'm ready for bed.
I'm sleepy.
I'm ready to go take a nap for the night.
The sun's been down for an hour or so.
I should have been in bed 30 minutes ago.
Meanwhile, it's what, like 7:30 maybe?
Yeah, like barely 8 o'clock.
All right.
Yeah, but all of that checks out for me. I definitely, you get once it starts getting dark, I'm just like, oh, I'm ready to go to sleep. I'm like, it's funny because, like I said, I am getting older. And I'm thinking more about it because my birthday's in a couple days, and I like the older I get, the more. Like the earlier it gets, I'm just like, I get having dinner at 4:30. Like we make fun of old people. And I'm like, I get it. Dinner at 4:30, you have your social drinks by like 5:30 and you're in bed by 7. That's amazing.
I'm not mad at it. Also, I'm a terrible sleeper, so it doesn't matter like what time I go to bed, what I take before I go to bed. Like if I smoke myself stupid or take a bunch of edibles, that's like the only time I will like go to bed and like stay asleep through the whole night.
Yeah.
Problem is I have a real hard time getting up in the morning after doing even that. But I wake up at like 6 a.m. most of the time because I want to have time before work to like feel like I didn't just sell myself for the whole day in my corporate job. So it's like, getting up at 6 and then trying to stay out real late after that is
Oh, it's tough.
hard.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that I can definitely relate to because the older that I get, the more of a morning person I am. Like I remember when I was in my like late teens and early 20s, like I could sleep till noon, 1 o'clock,
Oh yeah,
and
easy.
I can't now. Like I'm up, even without an alarm. If I sleep till 8 a.m., that is sleeping in. Usually I'm up between 6 and 7. Doesn't matter how late I was out, how much I, might have drank the night before. None of that matters. Soon as the sun starts coming up, I'm like, all right. My brain is like, it's time to get up.
Are
Now,
you
the
like
rest of my
happy to
body-
be awake at that time?
No.
Okay.
My body is not excited about it. And no, I'm not. Because if I could sleep in longer, I would love to just be able to lay in bed. But my brain starts just going. Like,
Yeah.
it just starts firing. I start thinking about, oh, I need to do this. I need to do that. I haven't done this yet. And, like, it's more of an anxious feelings, of things that I got to get done. So it's
Okay.
not like I get up and I'm like, oh, I can relax and just be chill. It's like, oh, you got shit to do. You're wasting the day.
Yeah. I
Kinda
think there's
thing.
like a misconception that like as you get older you become like a quote morning person where you're like, what a beautiful day. And it's like, oh no, I'm still anxious and hateful for the first 2 hours. It's just happening sooner in the day now.
And that's more aligned to me. It's not that I'm happy about it. It's just that my brain is like, you got things to do.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be a failure if you would get this stuff done. That's
I feel like the little voices in our heads are aligned.
I'm telling you, we're BFFs after this.
It's
Learning
a tier,
lot.
not a position. There's plenty of room.
Yeah, it's definitely not happy about it. If I could sleep till, I would be happy if I could sleep till like 9. It would be amazing.
I say all that. I slept until 10 a.m. today almost because I was like up and down so much last night. And woof. Like I really feel like hot garbage because I slept that long.
Right. And that's what happens if I do sleep in. I'm like, oh man, you wasted this morning.
Yeah, like
Even
I have
though I know-
guilt, anxiety. Like I didn't wake up in time to work out, so I'm like, well, I'm extra fat today, and it's just like, could tomorrow just be a little better?
Even though if I woke up earlier, I'd just be mad about being up, and I wouldn't accomplish those things anyway. Or if I did, I wouldn't be happy about it.
Like you're like, I'd have more time to be pissed.
That's exactly it. When I wake up early, I just have more time to be pissed. I'm just like, I could be sleeping till 10. But no, I'm sitting here drinking my coffee thinking, oh, you damn kids, get off my lawn.
Do you get kids on your lawn out here? Like, is that a thing?
I do actually. My neighbor has kids.
It would make me so
otherwise,
furious.
I don't care.
My brain goes like, my insurance has to pay if anything happens to you. Get the fuck off.
You're not wrong about that, though.
No time.
That is definitely something you have to think about when you have a property.
So, like, this is the first time I've ever owned property. And when I was talking to the insurance people about all that stuff, I was like, what do you mean I have to pay for it if something happens to someone? And they're like, them's the rules. And I was like,
That's how it's always been.
why has everyone let it be this way? This is dumb. Has no one crotchetier than me with money ever seen these rules and be like, we ought to change this shit?
Yeah, right. This can't be right. No, they should pay me because they were on my property. They trespassed.
Yeah, 100%. Like, well, fine.
Well, that's probably why people put trespassing signs up. So then if somebody does get hurt, they're like, I put a sign up. It's not my responsibility anymore.
I wonder what the legality is. And I'm interested now.
Now you're
I'm
going to
put one right next to my home security system. Signed. I said no trespassing.
You're gonna go check with that insurance person. You can be like, so, listen, Mr. Insurance Person.
Yeah, what are the rules?
What are the rules if I put a no trespassing sign up? Then what happens if somebody comes onto my property illegally and gets hurt? Am I still responsible?
Can I sue them? Like, what are the rules? 'Cause I feel like you really only see those signs like up in the mountains. Like those are on like hill people's houses. They're like, "I'll shoot you if you come."
Yeah, exactly. You don't see them in
they're not like
towns,
in town.
Usually,
Yeah, no.
Usually the town equivalent would be beware of dog.
Yeah, which I've had for like my 9-pound Chihuahua. People don't respect that shit.
What? They're not afraid of your 9-pound Chihuahua?
To be fair, that sign was put up for a pit bull that lived at the same building, and so like I think people just kind of like started to know that and wouldn't come in the gate, which like love it. I'm here for it.
All about that. Yeah, nobody's not coming into my house because of my dogs. They're not stopping. They're the worst security.
They don't bark when people come to the door?
Oh, they'll bark, but they're still the worst security. Like,
Yeah.
if an intruder comes in, and it's funny because I've been writing material about that too, because I think it's funny that a lot of people rely on dogs for security. And to me, the idea of having a security person that is outsmarted by a snack doesn't make sense. Like,
No.
a dog is easily distracted by a good snack. You just bring a treat with you, security averted. You know what I mean?
100%. And so I really like true crime, and there's a shocking number of serial killers and home invaders who like they will target people with dogs to show off.
Oh, I believe that 100%.
Yeah, and he was like, "Oh, you got a dog?
Yep.
Fuck your dog. Fuck
I'm going
you."
to show you. I'm going to bring a steak, and that dog's not going to say nothing.
Yeah, or even if it does, like, oh no, the dog's barking. Like, I'm like, my dogs are annoying when they bark, but like, I don't think they're stop someone who wants to murder you annoying.
Exactly. Yeah, that my dogs definitely are not. I would be interested to see what my dogs did if an actual intruder did come in, because I mean, I've seen my dog get scared by his own tail. You know what I mean? Like,
We don't think an intruder's meeting their maker that day. Sorry.
exactly. He's been scared of his own shadow. I don't think he's stopping an intruder.
Yeah.
And you met both my dogs, so you could probably guess how they are.
I mean, they
They
might
both-
slow them down because they're really cute, so they probably want to stop and pet them and be like,
Yeah,
yo,
that would be about it.
I gotta scratch this dog's ear.
Or maybe they would trip them because they're so small and the intruder didn't see them. But
Like unintentional booby traps.
exactly. They're like, I hear barking. What? Where is this dog? And then they fall over it.
Sort of like Home Alone. Love it.
Oh, that's amazing. All right, let's get back into comedy.
All right,
Couple
sorry.
things. Oh, no, this is great. I'm having a fantastic time. This is great. But I want to talk a little bit about your writing process. What is the evolution for a joke for you, and what kind of process do you have for writing material?
I have been criticized for this, but mostly I write about things that irritate me just because like that it's just my point of view, you know what I mean? And so if something is irritating, I'll always be like, well, that's weird or that's funny because, and then I'll start like thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's always a story. Like I'm not a one-liner comedian for the most part at all. Like it's not served me well in certain circumstances, but it's just the way I am, and I'm trying to like accept it and lean into it, and this is me. So when I have like what I think is a funny situation or a funny story, then it's like, okay, I'm just gonna like write it down for the most part and then start trying to figure out what's the actual like punchline, as it were, of this story. Like what's the funniest part? What needs some massaging to maybe be funnier than it actually was. And a lot of the times I will just like take whatever the story is and get it to like, this is the funniest way if I was telling it to a friend, and then I'll go take it to open mic and like see what happens. And then from there kind of be like, all right, we need to tag in like this first minute because everybody was just fucking staring at me, or you know, like just kind of figure out like there needs to be beats. Where do they go?
Do you, when you're doing that, you know, kind of reviewing it, do you try to sprinkle in laugh lines? That's something I try to do because
Yeah.
very similar to you, I'm more of a storytelling comic than a one-liner. And, you know, it's easy to, when you're telling a story, to forget about that, or like, oh, I still have to make this entertaining and interesting. And there's a lot of stuff that's important to the story, but might not be funny to an audience.
Right. I definitely think about it more than I did when I first started doing comedy, just because like my first time at New Talent Night, I got like they give you your stats, right? And they were like, 30 seconds before your first laugh. I'm like, oh, I guess that's bad. And so, like,
I guess that's bad.
so yeah, after that, I've definitely been like, okay, we got to get like a joke in there to like, this is fun, and then go from there, like making a point of, like I said, like if people are just staring at me for too long, I'm like, all right, we got to put something there.
Yeah, definitely needs something. Do you, because you said that you try to write it in a way you would tell a friend, so you're trying to make it more conversational, I assume?
Conversational, like, and like only kind of for that first pass, and like telling it for a friend might be like a little bit generous at this point, because I don't know, like with time I've gotten to the point where like it needs to be more like this. So
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because
yeah.
it's definitely different, like, you know, telling a story to a friend versus an audience of people, obviously. Because you get these people who are like, oh, well, my friends say I'm funny because I tell them all these stories, and then they go do comedy and like,
yeah, you can definitely see those people at open mic where like,
had to be there.
you are telling a story, you are not telling jokes.
Yep.
Which time and place, like whatever, but
Well, and the story could be full of jokes. You just have to get it there.
yes, you don't
That's
want
the
people to be
important
like, and then what? Like, I hate that look.
It's like, and you do see that a lot in comedy. It's funny to watch, and I'm sure I was that person. I think back on that, I'm like, oh man, I was probably that comic where they're like, what are you talking about? Are you gonna get to something funny?
yeah, for sure.
You're saying a lot of things, but none of it makes sense.
Or we just don't care.
Well, there's that too. There are definitely comics like that. I'm not that person. I'm trying to be funny. So when
Like, I'm doing my best, you guys.
Yeah. Would you laugh at me already? Telling you it's funny. My friend said so.
That's like my second biggest pet peeve is when people tell the audience, that's funny. And it's like, they would be laughing if it was funny.
Right? Oh my God, that's such a great observation. I've seen that too. And you can't help but think, and maybe it's just because we're older people and we're more bitter about things. We see things in that bitter light.
I'm the bitterest.
Because I see that, and then the same thing. First thing that comes to my mind is, well, if it was funny, they'd be laughing. You wouldn't have to say that.
Yeah. Also, why did you say fuck you first? Like,
yeah. Yeah, right. Fuck you. That was funny. Wow, that was aggressive and probably not funny.
Yeah, like, that'll get them on your side for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, just berate them and tell them what is and what isn't funny.
Yeah. Like, were you raised by my parents? That is not how you do it. I'll give you something to laugh about.
Do we have the same parents?
I mean, logistically, I think age-wise, potentially.
Potentially, yeah,
Yeah.
because your upbringing sounds very similar to mine.
Did you go to Catholic school, Dan?
That was the one thing I did, but I was raised Baptist, so
All right.
there's a lot of religion in there.
There's a church involved. It's never good. Doesn't matter which one.
Exactly. If there was a church or some sort of religion, there was probably a lot of guilt.
Yeah. Were there men in charge? I feel like the Venn diagram of men in charge and church is like not good.
You're right there. It's so true. All right. Well, this has been great. We're going to wrap up. I'd like to go out more positive. So we talked about, you shared a bombing story. Now I'd love to hear one of your favorite gigs that you've done. Doesn't have to be the best gig you've ever done. Just one of your favorite gigs that you've done since you've been doing comedy.
I think my personal favorite, I don't think it was like the best show I ever had, but it was really fun. Trey Bleo runs a show called ABC Comedy.
Oh,
Have you heard of?
I have. I had Jared Chandler on here
He
recently.
just did it recently, right?
Yes, and
Okay.
he was talking about it. Yeah.
So it's really fun. ABC, if you guys don't know, is anything but clothes. All of us didn't go to frats or sororities and had to have that explained to us. Hi. And so, yeah, you just make your like costume or whatever out of like whatever. And the host basically makes you take stuff off if the jokes don't land.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to do the show. It was like a immersion therapy kind of thing for me because like we were talking about, like when you get in your head and you're bringing a weird energy that has nothing to do with comedy into a room and you're like, you're not doing well because of it. I was having a real like self-confidence issue with like my appearance because I had gained some weight over COVID, and like I'm just now like to the weight I was before COVID happened. And so during that time I was like, I look like shit. No one is gonna like this because I'm just coming out here looking like and so it was bad. And so I was like, I have got to get over this. Like it has nothing to do with how I look, how funny I am. So like stop it, you know?
Yep.
And so I was like, all right, well, it can only be this much uncomfortable if I'm telling these jokes in my underwear. So I was like, I'm going to do the show. I'm going to have a good time. And hopefully, like, no one's going to be like, you look disgusting while it happens. And, like, I'll be fine. And so, like, it went great. I had a great set. The audience, it was a sold out crowd. It was so, like, warm. Everybody was laughing. There was no one with that little pinched butthole face look. It was great. And so, like, that was, like, my favorite show. Because it did really help me also get out of my head about, like, it's not about how you look. And so, like, that was so beneficial for shows going forward.
That's awesome. No, that's great that's why you did it. Because I feel like sometimes as comedians, we do need to force ourselves out of our own element. You know, that's why I'm a big fan of doing like theme shows and, you know, where you have to do more than just your stand up because it's easy to get stuck in your mindset, stuck in your jokes, and to do the same thing over and over and over again. And when you have to force yourself out of it, it definitely helps. Now, I'm curious, what was your, I guess for a lack of better terms, what was your costume? Because it's anything but clothes. So
it was like literal trash, sort of. Like I didn't do like a I'm a trash bag thing because like a lot of people do that, but like I had like all these like bubble wrap and like foil wraps from like shipping stuff from when we had moved into the house, and so like I was just like hot gluing everything together, and like it's kind of wild looking, but it was like pretty neat. I mean, like a little skirt and corset and a little like heart thing out of like insulated shipping padding.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it was like, I don't know, it was kind of fun, and yeah, nobody gets off that stage not in their underwear. So like,
regardless of how well you're doing, you're gonna be wearing your
it's the crowd buys a ticket for a reason, you guys.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, that's amazing. I'm glad that you were able to do that and it helped boost your confidence because we definitely need to do things like that. And like I said, sometimes you just have to force yourself to get out of your comfort zone. And it's great that we have shows that are available to do that kind of thing. So,
yes.
Last thing, and it might be one of the most important things, is you talked about earlier. You mentioned listening to music to like reset your mood. So this is an important question. We have the Art of Bombing Get Pumped playlist. Doesn't have to be a song that gets you pumped for comedy. Just a song that gets you pumped. What's a song you would add to the playlist?
Well, mine is both. Give me some Britney, work, bitch.
All right. All right. That's great. That's fantastic. That'll get added to the playlist. Thank you so much for doing this. Where can people find you? Direct them to your socials.
All my socials are at Jen Suthy, JENNSUTHY. Except for if you want to be like my actual friend on Facebook, that's Jennifer Sutherland.
All right. And all that stuff will be in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me. It's a fun time.
This has been a Dan Bublitz comedy production. Roar.